They hadn't been fighting a war. They'd been fighting evolution itself. The message came through encrypted channels, marked with priority codes that made every human commander stop what they were doing. Velkari forces had captured 43 civilians during a raid on a settlement near the coast. They were holding them in a warehouse complex 15 kilometers behind enemy lines. The aliens were offering a trade, Major Daehyun in exchange for the civilians. General Yuna's face appeared on the secure channel, her expression grim. It's an obvious trap. Obviously, Daehyun agreed. He was in the field command post studying the intelligence reports with Mina and Sumi. They want to capture me, study me, figure out how humans work. If they understand one of us, they think they can predict all of us. They're wrong about that, Mina said. You're not special, sir. No offense. None taken, Daehyun replied with a slight smile. But they don't know that. They think I caught that blade because I'm enhanced or trained or different somehow. They don't understand that any human could have done it with enough adrenaline. So we ignore it? Sumi asked. Let them keep the civilians? The question hung in the air. Daehyun stared at the map, at the red marker indicating the warehouse complex. 43 people, families, children. The kind of people wars were supposed to protect, not sacrifice. No, he said finally. We go get them. It's a trap, Yuna repeated from the screen. I know. But they're banking on us being predictable. They think we'll either ignore the civilians or try some clever rescue operation. They've probably planned for both. Daehyun's finger traced routes on the map. So we do something else. Something they won't expect, which is, Mina asked, I walk in the front door, alone, and challenge their commander to single combat. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Sumi spoke. That's insane. Even for you. The Velkari have a warrior culture, Daehyun explained. Horvax threw that blade because it was a traditional challenge. They respect combat, honor, individual skill. If I invoke their own traditions, they can't refuse without losing face in front of their troops. You'll die, Yuna said flatly. Maybe. But while I'm fighting their commander, my team will be extracting those civilians. And if I die, well, I'll die doing something the Velkari can understand and respect. That has value too. The plan was reckless, suicidal, exactly the kind of unpredictable human behavior that had been frustrating the Velkari for weeks, which was precisely why it might work. Commander Talvik received the message personally. The human called Daehyun was coming to the warehouse complex, alone, unarmed, requesting single combat with the Velkari commander for the release of the civilians. It was so stupid, so impossibly naive, that Talvik's first response was to check if it was a trick. But the scanners confirmed it. One human approaching on foot. No weapon signatures, no support troops within 10 kilometers, just the human who had caught a blade and started this entire nightmare. It's perfect, Vex said when Talvik consulted with her. We get him alive. We can study him extensively, learn what makes humans so unpredictable. He's offering single combat, Talvik said. If I refuse, I lose honor before my warriors. But if I accept and lose, you won't lose, Vex assured him. You're stronger, faster, better armed and armored. He's one human with no weapons. It's not even a contest. Talvik should have known better. After weeks of fighting humans, after seeing them exceed every limitation, after watching his invasion stall against impossible odds, he should have learned that nothing involving humans was ever not a contest. But the temptation was too great. A chance to end this personally, to restore honor, to finally capture the human who had started it all. He agreed to the combat. Daehyun walked through the warehouse complex gates at dawn. The Velkari had cleared a space in the central courtyard, a flat area maybe 30 meters across. Talvik waited there, his forearms crossed, his armor gleaming. Around the courtyard, hundreds of Velkari warriors watched from walkways and windows. This was theater as much as combat. The civilians were visible too, locked in cages along one wall. They looked scared but unharmed. Good. That meant the Velkari had honored at least that part of the agreement. You came, Talvik said, his translator device making his words sound almost surprised. I said I would, Daehyun replied. He wore simple combat fatigues, no armor, no weapons except a standard issue knife on his belt. The terms, single combat to first yield or death. If I win, the civilians go free. If you win, you get me. Agreed. Talvik drew a ceremonial blade. longer and heavier than the one Horvax had thrown weeks ago. I admire your courage, human, even if it's foolishness. Courage and foolishness look pretty similar from the outside, Daehyun said. What Talvik didn't know was that the entire complex was surrounded. Mina had 50 soldiers positioned in the hills waiting for the signal. Sumi had drones overhead hacking into Velkari communication systems. Jiho had a medical team ready for extraction. The combat was the distraction. The civilians were the objective, but Daehyun still had to fight, still had to survive long enough for his team to work. And looking at Talvik, at the alien commander who stood half a meter taller and had twice as many arms, he wasn't sure survival was realistic. The fight began without ceremony. Talvik lunged forward, blade sweeping in an arc that should have taken Daehyun's head off. The human ducked under it, rolled sideways, came up empty-handed because his knife was still in its sheath. This was about buying time, not winning. Talvik's second strike came from above. Daehyun dodged again, but the blade caught his shoulder, cutting through fabric and skin. First blood. The Velkari warriors watching clicked their mandibles in approval. Their commander was dominating. What they didn't see was the blood triggering Daehyun's adrenaline response. Pain receptors fired. Chemical signals flooded his system. His pupils dilated. His heart rate spiked. His body, sensing threat, opened the reserves. The next strike, Daehyun didn't dodge. He caught it. His hand closed around Talvik's wrist, stopping the blade mid-swing. The commander's eyes widened in shock. The human shouldn't have been strong enough. The scan said he wasn't strong enough. But the grip was iron, unbreakable. Daehyun pulled, throwing Talvik off balance. His other hand went to his knife, drawing it in one smooth motion. The blade shouldn't have been able to penetrate Velkari armor, but Daehyun wasn't aiming for the armor. He was aiming for joints, seams, the weak points that every armor had. The knife found Talvik's elbow joint. The commander roared, dropping his blade. Daehyun didn't let go of the wrist, using it as leverage to pull himself closer. This wasn't elegant. This wasn't trained combat. This was a street fight, brutal and intimate and absolutely human. Talvik had 3 other arms. They grabbed at Daehyun, trying to pull him away to crush him, but the human was moving on pure adrenaline now. His muscles delivering strength that would tear themselves apart later but worked fine right now. He twisted inside Talvik's guard, his knife finding another joint, then another. Around the courtyard, Velkari warriors shifted uneasily. Their commander was losing. Not slowly, not elegantly, but losing nonetheless to a smaller, weaker, less armed opponent who just refused to stop moving, refused to give up, refused to die. Then the explosion started. Sumi's charges placed along the perimeter walls, not to kill but to create chaos. Smoke filled the courtyard. The Velkari warriors rushed to defensive positions, their attention divided between the fight and the attack they thought was coming. Mina's team breached the civilian cages from underground. They'd spent the entire previous night digging through the warehouse's foundation, creating tunnels that bypassed every sensor and guard. The civilians were pulled down, passed hand to hand through narrow passages, and evacuated before the Velkari realized what was happening. In the courtyard, Daehyun felt his body starting to fail. His shoulder was screaming. His muscles were cramping from overexertion. The adrenaline that had given him superhuman strength for 3 minutes was running out, and the cost was coming due. But 3 minutes had been enough. He released Talvik, staggering backward. The commander stood there, wounded in 3 joints, his armor damaged, his blade on the ground. Around them, the smoke was clearing. The explosions had stopped, and the civilian cages were empty. "You cheated," Talvik said, his voice thick with pain and confusion. "No," Daehyun replied, his breath coming hard. "I honored the combat. Single fight, no weapons beyond what we brought. But you never said my team couldn't rescue the civilians while we fought. You assumed I came here to beat you. I came here to save them. Beating you was just a bonus." Talvik looked at the empty cages, then at his assembled warriors who had watched the entire thing. They'd seen their commander lose to a human in single combat. They'd seen human soldiers extract 43 prisoners from under their noses. They'd seen once again that nothing about humans was predictable. "Withdraw," Daehyun said quietly. "Take your forces and leave Earth. You can't beat us. Not because we're stronger or smarter, but because you can't predict what we'll do next. And you can't fight what you can't predict." Horvax stepped forward from the watching warriors. The blade leader looked at Talvik, at Daehyun, at the empty cages. Then he did something no Velkari had done in 47 conquered worlds. He bowed, not a gesture of submission but of respect, recognition that he Fey. In the medical research lab aboard the Velkari flagship, Chief Scientist Vex stared at the biological scans with something approaching horror. She had been studying human physiology for 3 weeks now, ever since that first encounter when Captain Daehyun caught the blade. Every test, every analysis revealed something new and disturbing about these creatures. "Look at this," she said to her assistant, pulling up a molecular display. "This is the human adrenal system. It's primitive, inefficient, prone to overreaction. By our standards, it's a biological defect that should have been removed through natural selection. But it wasn't," her assistant observed. "No," Vex agreed, "because it gives them something we lack. The ability to temporarily exceed their own limitations. When threatened, their bodies release a cocktail of chemicals that override normal safety restrictions. Heart rate increases, blood flow redirects to muscles, pain receptors suppress, time perception alters. They become temporarily superhuman. How much stronger?" Vex pulled up the data. "It varies wildly. Sometimes 20% improvement, sometimes 200%. We've found records of humans performing impossible physical feats under extreme stress, lifting vehicles to save trapped children, fighting off multiple attackers while severely wounded, surviving injuries that should be fatal. Their biology doesn't follow predictable curves. It spikes unpredictably whenever needed. That's inefficient." "It's adaptive," Vex corrected quietly. "They don't need to be strong all the time. They just need to be strong enough when it matters, and their bodies somehow know when it matters." Commander Talvik entered the lab, his mandibles clicking impatiently. "Tell me you've found a weakness. Something we can exploit." Vex hesitated. "The adrenaline response has a cost. It damages their bodies over time. Strains their hearts, tears muscle tissue, creates chemical imbalances. If we could force them into sustained high-stress situations, they'd burn out. How long? Hours, maybe days for the strongest individuals. Their bodies can't maintain that enhanced state indefinitely." Talvik's eyes brightened. "Then we change tactics. No more quick strikes. Sustained pressure. Constant engagement. We keep them in a state of alert until their bodies fail them." But even as he said it, Vex shook her head. "You're missing the point, Commander. It's not just the physical enhancement. It's what the enhancement represents. They have a biological system specifically designed to overcome impossible odds. They evolved to be strongest exactly when they're most threatened." Down on Earth, Mina learned exactly what that meant. Her squad had been sent to evacuate a civilian shelter when a Velkari patrol caught them in the open. 12 aliens against 5 humans. The odds were bad. The tactical situation was worse. "Fall back to the shelter," Mina ordered, her rifle barking short bursts to keep the aliens at distance. But the Velkari were pressing hard, using their superior numbers to flank and surround. Within minutes, Mina was separated from her team, trapped in a narrow corridor with 6 Velkari warriors closing in. Her rifle clicked empty. She dropped it, pulling her combat knife instead. The blade felt small against the aliens in their powered armor, but it was what she had. One of the Velkari, the one in the lead, raised his weapon to fire. Something changed in Mina's body. She felt it like electricity in her blood. Time seemed to slow. Not really, but her perception of it. She could see the alien's finger tightening on the trigger, could track the barrel's slight movement as it adjusted aim. Her body moved before her mind fully processed what she was doing. She dove under the energy blast, rolled to her feet inside the alien's reach, and drove her knife up through a seam in his armor. The blade shouldn't have penetrated. The angle was wrong, her strength insufficient. But the knife went in anyway, her arm muscles delivering force that made her shoulder scream in pain. The alien went down. Mina pulled her knife free and spun toward the next one. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Her hands were steady despite the tremor she knew would come later. Everything was sharp, clear, immediate. She could see weak points in the armor she'd never noticed before, could calculate angles and distances without thinking, could move with speed that surprised even her. 3 seconds later, 2 more aliens were down. The remaining 3 retreated, their translated voices calling for backup. Mina stood there, knife-dripping purple-blue blood, breathing hard. As the adrenaline started to fade, she felt the pain rush in. Her shoulder was probably torn. Her leg had a cut she didn't remember getting. Her entire body felt like it had been run through a grinder. But she was alive. and 3 Velkari warriors in powered armor were not. Jiho found her 5 minutes later, leaning against a wall, still holding her knife. The medic's eyes widened at the scene. "Mina, what happened?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "There were 6 of them. I should be dead." Jiho examined her shoulder, his gentle hands finding the damage. "You tore your rotator cuff. Probably during that first strike. You kept fighting with a torn shoulder. I didn't feel it until after." "That's the adrenaline," Jiho explained. "Your body shut down the pain receptors. Gave you everything it had to survive. You're going to hurt like hell for the next week." "Worth it," Mina said, watching the 3 alien bodies. "Jiho, I moved so fast. I could see things I shouldn't have been able to see." "How is that possible?" The medic helped her to her feet. "Because we're human. When we need to be more than we are, our bodies find a way. The Velkari engineered that capability out of themselves. They're always at their maximum, but their maximum is fixed. Ours isn't." News of Mina's fight spread through the human forces. More stories followed. A soldier who held a blast door shut against 3 Velkari trying to breach it, his muscles straining beyond what should have been possible. An engineer who outran an alien patrol while carrying an injured comrade. A medic who talked down a squad of Velkari warriors through sheer force of will and absolutely zero self-preservation instinct. The stories made their way to the Velkari as well. Private Kelvin heard them in the barracks, saw the footage when it was available, and felt something cold settle in his 3 stomachs. The humans weren't just unpredictable. They were capable of becoming unpredictable in real time, during combat, through biological mechanisms that defied calculation. He found himself in Horvax's command tent, needing to voice his concerns. The blade leader looked up from his tactical displays, his skin showing the gray tones of exhaustion. "Speak," Horvax said. "Sir, I've been reviewing the engagements. The human victories. They're not winning through tactics or technology." "Obviously. No, sir. I mean, they're winning through biology. Every time we think we have their measure, they become something more. Stronger, faster, more resistant to damage. It's like fighting an enemy that can evolve during the battle." Horvax was quiet for a long moment. "I know, I've seen it too. That human commander who caught my blade, he wasn't special. He was just human. They can all do it under the right circumstances. They all have that capability. How do we fight that?" "I don't know," Horvax admitted. "We've conquered 47 worlds, Kelvin. Every one of them fell to superior planning and execution. But you can't plan against an enemy that exceeds their own limitations when threatened. You can't execute strategy against biology that adapts in real time." Commander Talvik refused to accept it. He ordered sustained operations, keeping human forces under constant pressure. But the humans adapted. They rotated troops, ensuring fresh soldiers were always available. They used hit-and-run tactics that didn't require sustained adrenaline responses. They turned the Velkari's own strategy against them, using the constant pressure to tire the aliens while their own forces stayed fresh. Worse, the humans started learning. Mina trained other soldiers in what she'd experienced, teaching them to recognize when their bodies were giving them that extra capability. Jiho developed medical protocols for managing the aftermath of adrenaline responses, minimizing the damage and speeding recovery. Sumi designed equipment specifically to enhance human advantages, creating weapons and armor that worked with their biology rather than trying to replace it. Thres, still cleaning sewer water from his armor weeks after his embarrassment in the city, watched the reports with growing resignation. The Korval Legion had been deployed to break human resistance. Instead, they'd learned the same lesson everyone else had learned. Humans got more dangerous the more you pressed them. "We need to retreat," he told Talvik during a command meeting. "Not withdraw, not regroup. Actually leave this planet. The High Council would never approve." "Then the High Council doesn't understand what we're facing," Thres said bluntly. "These aren't soldiers, Commander. They're biological chaos engines. Every one of them has the potential to exceed their own limitations at unpredictable times. We can't plan for that. We can't counter it. We can only lose slowly instead of quickly," Talvik wanted to argue. But he thought of that blade catch. That single moment when a human had done something impossible and made it look easy. He thought of Mina fighting off 6 Korval warriors with a knife and torn shoulder. He thought of every report that started with "the humans should have lost but," and ended with descriptions of feats that violated biological probability. Somewhere deep in his 3 hearts, Talvik realized Thres was right. Something the Velkari had engineered out of themselves millennia ago. Something the Velkari High Council convened via quantum communication, their holographic forms gathering in a virtual chamber that spanned light years. Commander Talvik stood before them, his military decorations suddenly feeling very heavy. Behind him, screens displayed the current status of Earth's invasion. 3 weeks in, and they'd secured less than 5% of the planet's surface. "Explain," said High Counselor Vresh, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You assured us this world would fall in 6 rotations. Your forces outnumber theirs. Your technology exceeds theirs by generations, yet you make no progress." Talvik chose his words carefully. "The humans fight unlike any species we've encountered. They don't follow standard military doctrine. They don't pursue logical objectives. Every engagement is different. Our tactical computers cannot establish patterns, then destroy their command structure, eliminate their leadership, force surrender through overwhelming casualties. We've tried," Talvik admitted. "They don't have a centralized command that we can target effectively. Local commanders operate independently. When we destroy one command center, others adapt. When we eliminate leaders, new ones emerge with completely different strategies." Another counselor leaned forward. "You're telling us that a primitive species with chemical weapons and no space fleet is defeating the Velkari Empire?" "Not defeating," Talvik said carefully. "Stalling. Frustrating. They're not winning, but they're not losing either. And every day we remain here, we learn nothing new about how to beat them because they never fight the same way twice." The council members exchanged glances, their translated thoughts rippling through the chamber. Finally Vresh spoke again. "We're sending the Korval Legion. If standard forces cannot handle this, our elite warriors will. End this, Commander. One way or another." The transmission ended. Talvik stood alone in his war room, staring at the tactical displays. The Korval Legion, veterans of 100 campaigns. Warriors who had never tasted defeat. If they couldn't break the humans, nothing could. But even as he thought it, doubt gnawed at him. The Korval were the best the Velkari had to offer, but they were also the most optimized, the most refined, the most predictable. And if there was one thing he'd learned about humans, it was that predictability got you killed. On Earth, Major Daehyun sat in the ruins of what had once been a coastal city, sharing rations with his team. The buildings around them were hollow shells, casualties of an orbital bombardment from 2 weeks ago. But the bombardment had been precise, calculated to minimize casualties while maximizing fear. It hadn't worked the way the Velkari expected. "Intelligence says they're bringing in reinforcements," Mina reported, studying her tactical pad. "Something called the Korval Legion. Supposed to be their best warriors. Better than the ones we've been fighting?" Jiho asked. He was bandaging a cut on Sumi's arm, the engineer having gotten too close to a collapsing structure during their last engagement. "According to the intercepted communications, much better," Mina said. "More experienced, better equipped, trained specifically for worlds that resist." Daehyun chewed his ration bar thoughtfully. Around them, the city was quiet except for the wind whistling through broken windows. Most of the civilians had been evacuated. What remained was a battlefield, one they'd chosen deliberately. "Good," he said finally. Everyone looked at him. Sumi raised an eyebrow. "Good? They're sending their elite forces, and you think that's good?" "Better warriors mean they're worried," Daehyun explained. "Worried means we're winning. Not the war, but the psychological battle. They came here expecting easy conquest. Instead, they got chaos. Now they're escalating because their original plan failed." "Escalation usually means more firepower," Mina pointed out. "It also means predictability," Daehyun countered. "Elite forces follow doctrine even more strictly than regular troops. They've been trained in specific ways, taught specific responses. That makes them dangerous, but it also makes them readable." Sumi pulled up schematics of the ruined city on her pad. "If they're coming here, we should use the terrain. I've been mapping the structural weaknesses. There are at least 15 buildings that could be collapsed with minimal explosives. We could turn this entire sector into a maze." "Not a maze," Daehyun said slowly, an idea forming. "A trap that doesn't look like a trap. They'll expect ambushes, explosives, sniper positions. Give them all of that, but make it obvious. Make them think they've figured out our strategy. And then?" Jiho asked. "Then we do something else entirely." The Korval Legion arrived 3 days later. Their transport ships were sleeker than the standard Velkari craft, marked with symbols that proclaimed their elite status. They deployed in perfect formation, Their armor more advanced, their weapons humming with greater power. They moved through the city with the confidence of soldiers who had never lost a battle. Their commander, Thress, had fought on 20 worlds. He was old by Velkari standards, his skin bearing the scars of countless engagements. He studied the ruined city with tactical precision, noting every potential ambush point, every sniper position, every structural weakness. "The humans will be here," he told his officers, pointing to positions on his tactical display. "These buildings overlook the main approach. These structures have basement levels suitable for explosives. These corridors create natural choke points." "So we avoid them," suggested one officer. "No," Thress said. "We clear them. The humans think they understand warfare because they've stalled our advance. But they've been fighting regular troops. Now they face the Korval. We show them what real warriors can do." They advanced into the city in 3 columns, each supported by aerial drones and sensor sweeps. The first ambush came from exactly where Thress expected, a building overlooking the main street. His warriors responded with overwhelming firepower, reducing the structure to rubble. No human bodies were recovered, but that was expected. They'd retreated through prepared escape routes. The second ambush came from an underground position. Explosives detonated beneath a column of warriors, but the Korval armor absorbed most of the blast. 3 warriors injured, none critically. Again, the humans had vanished before retaliation could catch them. "They're retreating deeper into the city," Thress observed, "trying to draw us into close quarters where their inferior numbers become less of a disadvantage. Should we pursue?" asked his second-in-command. "Carefully," Thress ordered. "They're good at making obvious traps, but they're predictable. They think like guerrillas, not soldiers. We'll clear the city sector by sector until they have nowhere left to hide." What Thress didn't know was that every ambush, every retreat, every move was designed not to stop his advance, but to guide it. Sumi had mapped the city down to individual rooms. She knew which buildings would collapse which way, which streets had intact sewers beneath them, which structures had been secretly reinforced while others had been deliberately weakened. Daehyun watched from a position 3 blocks away as the Korval Legion pushed deeper into the urban maze. They were good, he had to admit, better than any Velkari troops they'd faced so far. They swept rooms with precision, covered each other's movements, adapted to minor changes in tactics. In a straight fight, his 30 humans would last maybe 5 minutes against 300 Korval warriors. Good thing he had no intention of fighting straight. "Mina, are they in position?" he asked quietly. She checked her pad, watching the thermal signatures move through the city grid. "Almost. Another 2 blocks and they'll be in the kill zone." "Sumi, are the charges ready?" "Ready," the engineer confirmed. "But Major, you know this is insane, right?" "Even for us, probably," Daehyun agreed. "Jiho, the civilians are clear?" The medic nodded. "Last transport left an hour ago. It's just us and them now," Daehyun waited. Patience was part of the plan. The Korval were advancing steadily, professionally, exactly as their training dictated. They'd cleared a dozen buildings, found and disarmed 3 explosive traps, and eliminated 2 automated turrets that Sumi had set up as decoys. They were winning, and they knew it. Thress reached the central plaza, a wide open space that his tactical instincts told him to avoid. Too exposed, too many sightlines, too obvious as a killing ground. But his sensors showed no heat signatures, no energy readings, no signs of human presence. The surrounding buildings were already cleared. His warriors had checked them thoroughly. "Advance across the plaza," he ordered. "Maintain formation." Air support standing by. The Korval warriors moved into the open space. 300 of the Velkari Empire's finest soldiers, armor gleaming, weapons ready. They were halfway across when Daehyun gave the signal. Sumi triggered the charges. Not the ones the Korval had found and disarmed. Not the obvious ones in the buildings around the plaza, but the ones in the sewer system beneath it. The ones that had been there for days, carefully shaped and positioned not to create a simple explosion, but to collapse the entire plaza's foundation. The ground didn't explode upward. It fell inward. 50 meters of reinforced concrete and asphalt dropped 6 meters into the sewers below. The Korval warriors fell with it, their formations breaking, their perfect tactics suddenly useless as they tumbled into darkness and water and debris. But that was just the first surprise. As the dust cleared and the Velkari warships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. their hulls gleaming with technology that humanity had only dreamed about in science fiction. Commander Talvik stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive planet grow larger on his display screens. His three eyes studied the data streams with satisfaction. This would be an easy conquest, perhaps the easiest in his long military career. The scans had been thorough. The humans were weak, slow, and technologically backward. Their weapons were crude chemical projectiles and simple explosives. Their ships barely reached their own moon. According to every calculation, every statistical model, every projection his science team had run, this invasion would take 6 planetary rotations at most. Then Earth would join the other 47 worlds that bowed to Velkari rule. "Commander, their military forces are mobilizing," reported his tactical officer. "They're establishing defensive positions across multiple continents." Talvik's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Let them. It changes nothing. Deploy the first wave to the eastern continent. We'll establish our landing zone in the peninsula region. The humans there have shown organized military resistance. We'll crush them first to break their spirit." Thousands of kilometers below, Captain Daehyun stood on the observation deck of Forward Base Gamma, watching those same ships descend. The base sat nestled in the mountains of the Korean peninsula, one of dozens of military installations hastily reinforced when the alien fleet had first appeared at the edge of the solar system 3 weeks ago. He was a compact man with steady hands and eyes that never seemed to blink when he concentrated. Right now, those eyes tracked every movement of the alien vessels. "They're not even trying to hide," said Lieutenant Mina, stepping up beside him. She was tall for a woman, with short-cropped hair and a scar on her chin from a training accident years ago. "Either they're incredibly arrogant or they want us to see them coming." "Both, probably," Daehyun replied. His voice was calm, the kind of calm that came from a decade of military service and more combat situations than he cared to remember. "Command wants us to hold position. No engagement unless fired upon. They want intelligence before committing to a full response." Mina frowned. "So we're bait." "We're observers," Daehyun corrected, though his slight smile suggested he knew the difference was minimal. "Get the team ready. Full combat gear, but weapons on safety. If shooting starts, I want us prepared. But I don't want anyone getting trigger-happy and starting an interstellar incident." The base hummed with activity as soldiers rushed to their positions. Engineer Sumi checked the defensive systems for the 3rd time, her fingers flying over control panels as she muttered calculations under her breath. She was young, barely 25, but she had a gift for understanding how things worked and, more importantly, how to break them. Medic Jiho prepared the medical bay, his gentle face set in concentration as he organized supplies and equipment. He'd been a civilian doctor before the military recruited him, and he still wore his compassion like armor, even knowing what might be coming. The first Velkari landing craft touched down 5 kilometers from the base. The craft was elegant in a brutal way, all smooth curves and dark metal that seemed to absorb light. The rear hatch hissed open, and the Velkari shock troops emerged. Through his binoculars, Daehyun studied the aliens carefully. They stood roughly 2 meters tall with 4 arms and digitigrade legs that made them look like they were always leaning forward, ready to sprint. Their skin was a dark purple-gray, covered in what looked like natural armor plates. But what caught his attention were the weapons they carried. Energy rifles of some kind, yes, but also blades. Long curved blades that hung from their belts or across their backs. Who brings swords to a space invasion? Mina wondered aloud. Someone who's done this before and knows it works, Daehyun said quietly. The Velkari formed up with military precision, their movements synchronized in a way that spoke of endless drilling. They began advancing toward the base, not rushing, just walking with absolute confidence. A delegation. They wanted to talk first. Daehyun ordered the main gates opened. He walked out with Mina and 4 other soldiers, leaving their rifles slung but ready. The 2 groups met in the open ground between the base and the landing site, dust swirling around their feet in the morning wind. The lead Velkari stepped forward. His armor was more elaborate than the others, marked with symbols that probably indicated rank. When he spoke, a small device on his chest translated his words into Korean. "I am Horvax, blade leader of the Velkari Empire. This world is now under our control. You will surrender your weapons and submit to imperial authority. Resistance is pointless. We have conquered 47 worlds. You will be the 48th. Daehyun listened to the translation, then looked at Mina. She shrugged slightly. He turned back to Horvax. I'm Captain Daehyun. This is Earth. We're not interested in surrendering today. Maybe try again tomorrow. The translator device seemed to struggle with his tone for a moment. The Velkari soldiers shifted, their weapons rising slightly. Horvax's four eyes narrowed, studying the human captain with something that might have been confusion. You do not understand. We have superior technology, superior numbers, superior training. You cannot win. Probably not, Daehyun agreed, but we're going to try anyway. It's kind of our thing. What happened next occurred so fast that later, when they reviewed the footage, they had to slow it down to see every detail. Horvax made a gesture that must have been the Velkari equivalent of frustration. Then in one smooth motion he drew the ceremonial blade from his belt and threw it at Daehyun. The blade spun through the air, its edge catching the sunlight. It was a traditional challenge, meant to intimidate, to show superior skill, to make the primitive human flinch or flee. In 47 worlds, no one had ever responded to this challenge with anything but fear. Daehyun's hand snapped up. His fingers closed around the handle of the blade mid-flight. The weapon stopped spinning, held firmly in his grip. He looked at it for a moment, turning it to examine the craftsmanship, then looked back at Horvax. Nice balance, he said. The entire Velkari squad froze. Every single one of them, weapons half raised, simply stopped moving. It lasted only 3 seconds, but in those 3 seconds, something fundamental shifted in the invasion of Earth. Horvax's translator device made a sound like choking. The blade leader's four eyes widened, his mandibles spreading in what could only be shock. Behind him, the other Velkari soldiers exchanged rapid clicks and whistles that the translator couldn't process fast enough. Daehyun tossed the blade back. Horvax caught it automatically, but his movements were mechanical. Stunned, the human captain smiled slightly. We're done talking. Go back to your ship. Tell your commander that Earth isn't going to be an easy conquest. Tell him we catch blades here. The Velkari retreated. They didn't run, but they walked backward, weapons still raised as if afraid to turn away from the humans. Horvax kept staring at Daehyun until distance and dust obscured him from view. Back on the Velkari flagship, Commander Talvik watched the footage of the encounter 17 times. His science team stood around him, their translated voices rising in agitated debate. Impossible. The scan data shows his neural response time at 0.3 seconds. The blade traveled at 40 meters per second. He shouldn't have been able to track it, let alone catch it. Perhaps the scans were wrong. The scans are never wrong. We've used this technology on 47 worlds. Talvik silenced them with a gesture. He stared at the frozen image of the human captain, hand wrapped around the blade's handle, expression almost bored. Something cold settled in his 3 stomachs. For the first time in his military career, Commander Talvik felt uncertainty. Run full biological scans again, he ordered. I want to know everything about human physiology. Everything. And prepare the core of all warriors. If the humans want to fight, we'll show them what real warriors look like. But even as he gave the orders, Talvik couldn't stop replaying that moment. The catch. The casual, impossible catch. On 47 worlds, his warriors had thrown that challenge. On 47 worlds, it had ended with terror and surrender. On Earth, a human had simply caught the blade and handed it back. The invasion, Talvik realized with growing dread, might not be as simple as the calculations predicted. The footage spread through the Velkari invasion fleet like a virus. Every ship, every unit, every warrior saw the moment when Blade Leader Horvax threw his ceremonial weapon, and the human simply caught it. In mess halls and command centers, on transport ships and battle cruisers, Velkari soldiers watched their screens in silence. Private Kelvin stood in the barracks of his troop carrier, watching the replay for what must have been the 20th time. His 3 eyes couldn't look away from the human's hand snatching the blade from the air. The movements were so smooth, so effortless, like the human had known exactly where the blade would be before it even left Horvax's hand. It's edited, said one of his squad mates. Has to be. The scan data proves humans can't move that fast. The scan data also said they would surrender in 6 rotations, Kelvin replied quietly. Maybe we scanned wrong. Commander Talvik called an emergency meeting of his senior officers. They gathered in the war room, their body language displaying various states of agitation. The science team had spent the last 12 hours running new scans, analyzing the footage from every angle, comparing human biology to every species in their database. Chief Scientist Vex spoke first, her voice tight with frustration. We've found the discrepancy. Humans don't operate at their maximum capacity as a baseline. They have what appears to be a reserve system built into their biology. When threatened or challenged, their bodies release chemical compounds that temporarily enhance their physical and cognitive abilities. How much enhancement? Talvik demanded. We're still calculating, but preliminary data suggests anywhere from 20 to 300% improvement across multiple systems. Strength, speed, pain tolerance, neural processing, visual acuity. It's all variable, seemingly controlled by emotional and psychological states. The room fell silent. Talvik's mandibles clicked nervously. 300%? That's impossible. No biological system can sustain that kind of variance without destroying itself. They can't sustain it, Vex confirmed. The effect is temporary, but that's what makes it so dangerous. We scan them in their normal state and assume that's their maximum capability. Then when combat begins, they transform into something else entirely. One of the senior commanders leaned forward. So our entire invasion strategy is based on incorrect biological data? Yes. Another long silence. Talvik looked at the frozen image of Captain Daehyun on the main screen. The human stood there, blade in hand, with an expression that suggested mild interest rather than fear or aggression. What kind of species remained calm while catching a weapon thrown at lethal velocity? Update the projections, Talvik ordered. Factor in this enhancement capability. I want new timeline estimates. The tactical computers worked for several minutes. When the results appeared, Vex's skin color shifted to a pale gray, a Velkari expression of deep concern. Previous estimate, 6 rotations. New estimate, inconclusive. The variance in human capability makes standard projections impossible. They could surrender in 6 rotations or resist for 600. We have no way to calculate their breaking point because we can't predict when or how they'll utilize their enhancement capabilities. Back on Earth, Daehyun sat in the command center with his team, reviewing their own analysis of the encounter. General Yuna's face filled the main screen, transmitted from the Global Defense Headquarters. The aliens are scared, she said without preamble. Our intelligence shows increased communication traffic across their fleet. Lots of data being transmitted back and forth. They're trying to understand what happened. What did happen? Mina asked. I mean, I saw it, but I still don't understand how you moved that fast. Daehyun shrugged. I saw the blade coming. I caught it. It wasn't that complicated. The alien seemed to think it was impossible, Jiho pointed out. He sat at his station, medical readouts displayed on his screens. I've been looking at the footage too. Your heart rate jumped right before the throw. Your pupils dilated. Classic adrenaline response, so? Daehyun said. So maybe that's what they didn't expect, Sumi interjected. She was pulling up data on her own screens. I've been reading about their biology from what our scientists have learned. The Velkari don't have an adrenaline system like ours. They're optimized. Everything runs at maximum efficiency all the time. General Yuna nodded. Our xenobiologists reached the same conclusion. The Velkari have engineered themselves over thousands of years. They removed what they saw as biological inefficiencies. They're stronger than us baseline, faster than us baseline, but they don't have the surge capacity we do. They don't get scared, Daehyun said slowly, understanding. They can't get that boost of strength or speed when they need it. Exactly, and they've been conquering species for centuries using the same strategy. Scan the target species, calculate their maximum capability, deploy overwhelming force. It's worked perfectly on 47 worlds. But we're different, Mina said. We're unpredictable, Yuna corrected. And I want to weaponize that. Captain Daehyun, you're being promoted to Major Effective immediately. You're taking command of a new unit. Call it whatever you want. Your mission is simple, be unpredictable. Fight them in ways they can't calculate. Make them afraid. Over the next week, the war began in earnest. The Velkari deployed their standard invasion protocols. They established forward bases, sent out patrol units, attempted to seize strategic locations. Earth's military forces met them with conventional tactics at first, and the results were predictable. The Velkari had better weapons, better armor, better everything. Humanity lost ground steadily. Then Daehyun's unit entered the field. They hit a Velkari supply convoy on a mountain road. Instead of attacking from cover with rifles, they triggered a rock slide that came from the wrong direction, blocked the convoy in a narrow pass, then disappeared before the aliens could respond. No shots fired. No casualties on either side, but the convoy was stuck for 6 hours, and by the time they cleared the road, The supplies they'd been carrying were needed elsewhere. They sabotaged a communication relay by making it work incorrectly instead of destroying it. The relay kept functioning, but it transmitted garbled data that made the Velkari think their units were in different positions than they actually were. The confusion caused 3 separate friendly fire incidents before the aliens figured out the problem. They defended a civilian evacuation center not by holding a fortified position, but by making the Velkari think the building was already empty. Sumi rigged the power systems to make it look abandoned on thermal scans. When the Velkari squad entered to secure it, they found themselves locked inside with civilians who weren't combatants, but weren't exactly cooperative either. The aliens retreated rather than harm non-military targets, uncertain how to handle the situation. Each engagement was different. Each strategy was unique. The Velkari tactical computers began throwing error messages. There was no pattern to analyze, no doctrine to counter, no predictable behavior to exploit. In the flagship's war room, Commander Talvik studied the reports with growing frustration. His officers argued among themselves, proposing strategies that Talvik kept rejecting. Every plan assumed the humans would behave logically, rationally, according to established military doctrine. But they didn't. They're not fighting to win territory, Vex observed. They're fighting to create chaos. War is about order, Talvik replied. About superior strategy overcoming inferior tactics. This isn't war. This is unpredictable, Vex finished. Horvax entered the war room, his armor still marked with dust from his latest patrol. The blade leader looked tired, his movements less sharp than usual. Report, Talvik ordered. We engaged a human patrol unit in the western sector, 10 humans against 30 of our warriors. According to all tactical analysis, we had overwhelming advantage, and the humans scattered immediately. We pursued. They led us into an industrial area, then triggered multiple explosions, not targeting us directly, but collapsing structures, creating obstacles, dividing our forces. By the time we regrouped, they were gone. 0 human casualties, 6 of our warriors injured by falling debris. They ran away, one of the officers said dismissively. They made us chase them into a trap, Horvax corrected. There's a difference. They chose the battlefield. They controlled the engagement. We thought we were hunting them, but they were hurting us. Talvik's mandibles clicked in agitation. This wasn't how war worked. War was about superior force, better technology, calculated strategy. But how did you calculate against chaos? How did you strategize against unpredictability? Bring me the human commander, he ordered. This Daehyun. I want him captured alive. If we can study him, understand how he thinks, maybe we can predict the others. Horvax's skin color shifted slightly, showing doubt. Commander, with respect, I don't think you can predict them. That's the point. They don't want to be predicted. Everything can be predicted with sufficient data, can it? Horvax gestured at the screen showing various human engagements. We've conquered 47 worlds using prediction, statistical analysis, calculated warfare. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've forgotten how to fight an enemy that fights back with chaos instead of order. Talvik wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Somewhere in the cold logic of his 3 hearts, he felt something unfamiliar.